the Lights Out F1 podcast. I'm Patrick, that's Claire, that's Jakob. We didn't have a race this weekend. Which is weird to say. I feel like we've had a lot of races kind of back to back to back. There are no triple headers yet, but a lot of double headers back to back, which is nice. But I guess the first thing I want to talk about is McLaren is bringing another upgrade to Hungary. Um, so for reference, in Silverstone or Austria, Lando got the McLaren upgrade. And then in Silverstone, Oscar got the McLaren upgrade and Lando got a new front wing. And then in Hungary, Oscar's gonna get the front wing, and both of them are getting another upgrade. So I'm kind of curious, what do you guys think about that?
Are we going to see Lando's first win this next weekend?
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean,
You'd have to have like what happened in 2021 where Valtteri just takes everybody.
that's not out of the question. That Alfa Romeo is.
Well, that would imply that Valtteri has to qualify as high as the McLarens and the Red Bulls.
Yeah.
He can probably qualify as high as Checo, but
Yeah, if we're talking about Checo qualifying in Q3.
hmm.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the upgrades coming?
uh, I think we'll see. I mean, obviously they made a big step forward. Whether that transitions into like consistency at all tracks, especially because Hungary is sort of a different track as compared to Silverstone. So it'll be an interesting to see if the upgrades are working there, and then we'll take it from there because you still have Mercedes, Aston, and Ferrari to a lesser extent to contend with.
Yep.
And Lewis is always, Lewis is like a 7-time or 8-time winner there, so it's gonna be it's one of his favorite hunting grounds. So
Yep.
um, he probably isn't competing for the win, but he's definitely, he'll probably be on par with. He'll probably be the second best driver, I think, on the grid for that weekend. So we'll see how that goes.
It's agreeable. I think so McLaren was really strong in the medium and high speed corners in Silverstone, but they still struggle in the low speed, which is something that Lando touches on a lot. So I guess the hope is that they're gonna bring an upgrade that makes them more stable in low speed corners, because other than that, they're all good. Hungary has a track with a lot of medium and low speed corners. There's just one high speed corner in the entire track, so hopefully we get to see McLaren's high up there. I don't think there's any other teams that are registered for upgrades, and if there are, I definitely haven't seen it. Um, but I guess I'm kind of curious. Do you guys think Max is gonna take this one again?
Yes,
Odds are yes. I mean,
I'll put my life savings on it. Yes.
all right, let's make a
I
bet.
don't know how much
I
that is,
say
but
Max doesn't win. I'll bet you, I don't know, a
she'll
drink or
match you.
something. Jakob, you on?
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll buy you a drink that
Okay.
Max takes to win.
hmm
Um,
We'll see. We'll check back.
so
Yeah,
pertaining
100%.
to Mercedes, Lewis also said that in the conference room with Max Lando and him, that it's not surprising that the McLaren's getting about as fast as the Red Bull, given that the McLaren looks like a Red Bull. So
Mm.
do you guys think this is like uh do you guys think that Mercedes, and no offense to you, Jakob, because obviously you're probably going to disprove this, but do you guys think Mercedes is getting a bit too much, like, doing a bit too much finger pointing at other teams for copying Red Bull?
Oh, you. I mean, it's a thing that happens in Formula One, right?
Yeah.
It can all eventually they all converge to this similar concept to generate max downforce. So like, yeah, okay, you can. I mean, maybe the finger pointing is getting a bit much, but he does have a valid point in that most teams will eventually converge by. I think by the time the new regulations. By the start of the new regulations, I think all of the teams will have a car that looks somewhat, if not identical, to a Red Bull.
Yep.
So I mean, it is what it is. I mean, the Mercedes car looks like a Red Bull. Like the side pod design is kind of like a Red Bull. So it's And they admitted it. They were like, yeah, you know, Christian Horner can stick a tiny Red Bull sticker on it, and you know, we'll still use the concept. So
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. It's all finger pointing. It's a big part of Formula One. Red Bull used to do it
Yeah.
when they were not dominating. Christian Horner did it a lot. So you know, it's always something that's a part of Formula One.
Yeah. Claire, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. If it's silly if you like don't go towards what seems to be like the fastest concept. So
Mhm.
if you can,
Um,
if you have the money to bring the upgrades that can get you there, they should do it. And finger pointing is just like Jakob said, a part of it.
One of the things I am curious about is, so in the previous era cars where Mercedes were dominating, a lot of teams were obviously converging towards their concept, but I think it was noticeable that most of the teams still ended out that regulation with very different cars. And there are a lot of various different what's what I'm looking for, like inventions that came out during the turbo hybrid era that kind of allowed teams to be different, even if Mercedes was the most dominant. So I'm kind of curious, do you guys think that this era is going to end out in the same way, or do you think it's going to be like by the time 2026 is over, it's just going to be 20 Red Bulls on the grid?
Yeah, I mean, if they think something else will work and it's, let's say, cheaper or something, because I mean, you want innovation to come out of F1.
Yeah.
You really do. So it would only make sense though if they could figure something out that would get that advantage and still not break the bank.
I think F1 has a problem in that they don't partic- they don't particularly. Yes, we're all about innovation. We're all about generating the fastest cars, but they do have a innovation problem since they ban anything that's sort of unique. You know, you had DAS that got banned, and then you had a series of sort of interesting additions to cars that get banned, and it's a whole process. And so, you know, if some team were to come out with something that gives them a unique advantage, I could like if Mercedes, for example, were to come out with something that gives them that gets them, let's just say not this season, but next season gets them to Red Bull's level, and it's unique to them. I could definitely see something happening along the lines of them getting it, the FIA banning it because it, you know, other people can't develop it or other people can't bring it in using the budget cap. So yeah, I mean, at some point, I definitely think you'll see 20 Red Bulls driving around the grid. Um, who maximizes? I mean, Red Bull have obviously maximized their concept, but who maximizes it to the next best way to compete with Red Bull is a different question. I think it's either going to be Mercedes or Mercedes. I think I don't really have a lot of faith in Aston and Ferrari just yet, but so yeah, we'll
McLaren,
see how it goes. I no, sorry, I can't put my faith in McLaren just yet.
fine, fair, fair, fair.
I think I can. They've taken the largest step in the grid towards Red Bull, given how far back they were from the start of the year. Um, but So there's two things pertaining to Red Bull that I want to talk about. The first one being that Lando has followed the Red Bull Instagram,
Oh my god.
and Charles has as well. And it's come out that Liberty Media is actually persuading and pushing for Red Bull to sign another super driver. Right now, it looks like the broadcast statistics are getting similar to how it was during 2013 when Seb won the last 9 races of the season. And it's not that they're losing money. Quite frankly, it's very hard to lose money in F1, but the amount that they're gaining isn't as much as they're hoping for this season. So I'm kind of
Mm.
curious what you guys think about the prospect of another 2016 happening where you have Charles or Orlando driving alongside Max in a Red Bull, and it's like, yeah, they'll dominate the field, but it'll actually be a fight between the top two drivers.
Ooh, that's really exciting to me. I want to see someone compete with Max. I think that would be so cool. Like, because Checo obviously isn't delivering that. And Red Bull doesn't just want a second driver to get decent points. They do want a second driver that can pull in a lot of points, so they don't have to worry about the constructors. Even though Max is doing that all by himself, um, I I think it would be really cool to see one of the big names like Charles or Lando in the Red Bull. I think McLaren's gonna fight like hell to try to keep Lando. Ferrari, I'm not so sure about Charles, what they can do. That man has dealt with a lot there. But I think that probably Carlos would leave Ferrari before Charles would. That's like my vibes. Not that he would go to Red Bull or he would even get that opportunity, but just that he would be finished with Ferrari politics and all of that before Charles.
Yep.
And if Lando ends up in the Red Bull, that's all the better. I mean, I want to see him win a world championship, whatever car he can get in to try to even try that. So, okay, Jakob, what? What's a
No,
little
okay.
shaking?
So here's my thing. It's not gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen. I don't think either one of those. I think Lando has the best chance of getting into that Red Bull seat, just because he's not as good as Max. He's good, no doubt. He's good. He's just not as good as Max. He's
Okay, but
Max is
Charles
like,
isn't as good as Max, if you're going to say that.
yeah, but Charles is also like someone who's like got like raw qualifying pace. Maybe on race day, yeah, I'll admit he's not as good as Max. He will probably drop down below if he loses motivation. But they know for on a but like I think Red Bull know as Lando to me is a defined sort of quantity in that in a good car this is what he can do, and in a bad car this is what he can do. And we know that Max is like a killer in good cars, and in like midfield cars he's still a killer. He's still a podium getter all the time. So um I think Lando has probably, if I were to bet my money on it, I'd put my money on Lando getting into that seat. Um because I think they're able to sort of push him into that second driver role. Um Charles, I would see him more moving towards Mercedes or like Aston or something like that, just because I don't think Red Bull want um, the situation where they have two number one drivers competing for it. I don't think Christian Horner wants it. He said that I don't think he wants it. I think they've put all of their money in Max. They've for several seasons, for a long time now, all of the eggs have been in Max's basket. So, and Christian Horner said it. He said, they asked him about where he wants Lewis Hamilton, and he said, no. First of all, we can't afford them. We can't afford two number one drivers, and secondly, it's just too much of a hassle for me. So, I mean, I don't think. I think Lando. It's either for me. It's between Lando or like Daniel, for example. I don't think Charles is going to get that Red Bull seat. I think he'd either go to Mercedes or Aston if he were to leave for maybe even McLaren if Lando left.
So, um, first off, I'd say it's the opposite. I think Charles has a higher chance of being in the Red Bull seat.
What?
Not because Lando's not as good, but because Charles' contract runs out at the end of next year, where Lando's contracted till the end of 2025, and his contract is vastly more expensive than Charles. Um, Also, Lando has his vocally and I want to say like just generally given his full faith into McLaren until at least the end of 2024. Because first off, these are the types of upgrades they bring in without their wind tunnel. Their wind tunnel is up and active now. So the next upgrades we'll see in their 2024 car that we'll see are all going to be using their new wind tunnel. Um, so they're not going to have to spend, I don't know, like a seventh of their budget cap transporting parts from another facility across the UK or across Europe. It'll all be homemade, and I think that since McLaren have made much larger steps forward than Ferrari, and it's showing that way, I think Lando is okay with seeing where this goes. Whereas Charles, Ferrari have taken a forward step and then a back step and then a forward step and then a side step and then a back step and then a forward step. So at some point you do get tired of it, right? And I think um, I don't think it'd be a problem for Christian Horner to actually have two number one drivers. First off, they can't afford it because they're Red Bull and they're not spending as much time in CFD. They get the most winnings and they arguably make the most out of any of the teams. Um, Whether or not Charles would be a challenge for Max, I'm not sure. Maybe in qualifying, but during the race, I don't think so. I think that Charles and Lando are of the same quantity in that they both provide Max a challenge in different aspects. Um, I guess when it comes down to it, it's like the scenario that's been marked out is that Red Bull cannot pay for either of these drivers right now because buying out those contracts is gargantuan. So, what a couple of places have been talking about is Checo Perez leaving at the end of this year. Like they'll buy out the rest of his contract, which isn't much because they don't pay him that much, comparatively speaking. They'll bring Daniel Ricciardo up if they have to, and then somebody else can fill that AlphaTauri seat. Um, but I'm kind of curious, like, if you guys had Lando and Charles on the same team, who would you pick out to be your number one driver, or would you let it be like a Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton situation?
You're asking us? Don't you already know the answer? I'd say Lando, and he'd say Charles.
Yeah, I'd say Charles.
Holy moly.
I
Right?
mean, I just have more faith in. I just believe that in a good car,
Why
Charles.
though?
I just believe that in a good car with a good team, Charles Leclerc can is world championship material. I firmly believe it. I think he
Really?
is. I think. I mean, it's not like Lando's proven to be like a world champion, right? He's a good driver. He's good. He's as good as Charles, right? They're both known quantities. I just think that Charles, with a good team, with someone that with like a team that works efficiently, non-reliability, with reliability, with upgrades, with proper team and driver management, I think Charles Leclerc can be a world championship,
That's
a
asking
world
a
champion.
lot of
That's
everything
that's
has to be
asking. I think that's
perfect.
asking the bare minimum from like a good Formula One team. Like it's asked like all the Formula One teams are in Formula One to compete for a championship, right? And so everybody knows what it takes to win a championship, and that's the bare minimum you ask for: good driver management, good reliability, decent reliability, and like a good car. That's the bare minimum of a world championship winning team, right?
Mm.
So I just have faith in Charles. I think that maybe it's misplaced. Maybe in the future I'll be proven wrong, but I think you put him in a good car, put him in a good car and a good team, he'll win a world championship.
Mm.
Hmm.
I think if you put Lando and Charles on the same team, uh, Lando would take that.
Let's
um,
go.
quite frankly, I think that if you had to put it as a pyramid, the top driver right now is um, Max, like undeniably. And if you had to put who's in the second row, it'd be Lewis, Charles, and Lando. I don't think George is up to scratch, honestly, which kind of
I
sucks
think
because I like him a lot, but I just don't think he's there.
I put in that second tier. I put Science. I think he's having a very underrated season right now. He's beating Charles in the
Yeah,
drivers' championship. I
Hmm.
mean points are points,
yeah.
and Charles is having arguably an underwhelming season. He's had like
That's
a
not
couple of
arguable.
decent.
It's an underwhelming
Yeah,
season.
it's an underwhelming season. He's had a couple of decent performances, but overall, he's having a pretty underwhelming season, and Science is the one raking in the points right now. So I mean, maybe on talent, you would put Charles Lewis, and Lando,
Mhm.
but based on this season, Carlos is outperforming a little bit to the extent the car he's using having to use like strategy and like stuff like that to his advantage, but he is doing a decent enough job to the point where he is the points leader for Ferrari,
Yep.
and still they treat him like shit. So you know I so I think Science is up there based on his points on how the season's going.
Yep.
Man, I feel so bad for Carlos right now with the whole strategy and being at Ferrari. I, I mean, the radio call last race where he's like, his radio engineer's like, okay, plan B. And Carlos is like, what's plan B again? And then his engineer's like, I'll check on that. Like, what is going on there? What is going on? Are
Yeah,
they
I think
not? I,
I think he recently said like he was asked I think who would you want to drive with Max or Lewis, and he was like I'd like to drive with Lewis just because I've already driven with Max and so I
yeah.
pay my own quantity, but Lewis obviously you could learn a lot from, and
Hmm.
I would not be
That'd
mad
be
at
a
that.
good team.
I would
Yeah.
not be mad at that team because Lewis and Carlos actually have a really good relationship,
Mm.
Also, just
and
both pretty
like Lewis,
consistent point scorers.
Yeah.
yeah, and they're good. They're good, pretty decent like drivers. So well, yeah, good drivers. But I would not be mad at that team pairing if George Russell sort of eventually decides to drop off.
Mm.
How long do you guys think Carlos is going to put up with this treatment at Ferrari? I mean, he's contracted
His
until the end
contract's
of
up.
next year. Like if he actually ends out ahead of Charles this season, he'll be ahead of Charles as far as points for 2 seasons compared to Charles one, and they have one more season together. Both their contracts end in 2024, and quite frankly, Ferrari is at risk of losing both of their drivers at this rate. So I'm kind of curious, like, do you guys think he just leaves at the end of 2024?
He'll look around and see what his best option is, and it's probably not going to be Ferrari. Yeah.
Jakob, your thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think he's gonna leave. Where he goes is a different question. If Lando leaves, maybe McLaren, but I don't think
Back to
I
McLaren.
don't I don't think he'd do that. I think he'd want to try and get to a forward team. So I think Aston, Mercedes, he'd probably talk to Toto about it, depending on Lewis's contract situation, because he hasn't signed, so you never know.
How cool would it be if Lewis went back to McLaren?
I don't
I
think it's gonna happen.
I know.
It's never gonna
Oscar
happen.
looks amazing right now, and the McLaren looks amazing right now, and Lando looks amazing right now. And seeing those two sitting 2-3 on qualifying and 2-4 in the race, like I think McLaren's chilling with this driver pairing.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think I'd like to see him. Like, I think there's three drivers that Lewis wants to team up with. Russell is definitely not one of them. I think there's Charles, there's Lando, and there's Carlos. I think those are the three drivers. Those are the three young drivers that he really likes,
Mhm.
especially Lando.
Yeah,
I think he's a
everybody
big fan.
likes Lando.
And I think he sees like a bit of himself in Lando. I think like that, McLaren, and then the whole pathway it's a very similar pathway in some ways. So
Mhm.
I think those three drivers he'd like to pair up with, and I wouldn't be mad at it. I would like to see how that works out. I mean, if it works out, it works out. But it's a hypothetical situation that I wouldn't be mad at one of those three.
Um, Last thing, and probably the most important thing, we've got a new driver on the grid for Hungary, and if you haven't read the news by now, you should probably catch up on it. But Nick DeVries has been ousted from the AlphaTauri seat for Daniel Ricciardo. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Ruthless. That's how we know Red Bull to be anyway.
Mhm.
So not that surprised, but I mean, definitely on this podcast, we were all thinking that Nick DeVries had more time. He did
At least till
not,
the halfway mark of the
obviously.
season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Helmet couldn't justify it to Christian anymore, and they came to an agreement that Danny's times at Silverstone, which honestly phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
He was on what, like, hard tires, and he like set something close to like the
No, he
qualifying
was
lap.
wasn't he doing a Pirelli tire test,
Yeah, he
and
was.
he apparently he set lap times that were close to the front grid,
Hmm.
You don't
front,
believe
front
that? Like,
row.
why else would they?
No, but like the problem with that statement is that the track conditions are different as
True, true,
from
true.
Saturday to the following week. The Silverstone track conditions are always changing, super variable. You don't know what tires he was on because it was a tire test, so they don't know what tires are on.
Hmm.
Mm.
Just all that combined, yeah, maybe it was good. And I think I read somewhere where he was 7/10 off max, and it was possibly a front roll lap time. I just think that it's too much. There's too much variability in it to say that these are the lap times that are definitely like good enough. Yeah, they were good lap times, but I think it was harsh. It was so harsh of them to cut Nick like that. I mean, you gave him what, eight races,
It
nine
was,
races.
I think it was 10. No, 11. It's been 11
No,
races.
he
Guys,
was
I'm not
he was
even.
prompt.
I don't feel bad for him.
I
He
don't.
chose his path with Red Bull,
I
and
mean, I
that's what
disagree.
you
I
get.
think I think you gave, like, yeah, he wasn't part of the Red Bull family, but like
Hmm.
he had like a difficult first season. You gave him 2 seasons. You gave Pierre like three different chances at 2 different chances. I mean, Alex has got a second chance. you can't expect someone who's, I mean, 11 races in arguably the slowest car on the grid, one of the most, probably the most useless car to drive, an incredibly difficult car to drive. 11 races, and you fully expect him to compete for points on the slowest car on the grid when you've got like a tough competition in the midfield to get points. You're
Sure.
not making any advances in development, as far as we can tell. You're upgrading, but not making any steps forward. And I just think that it was a harsh decision. Yeah, Red Bull has a history of it, but apparently he was promised a winter break, and even that wasn't fulfilled. To
Mhm.
what put no offense to no obviously no offense, but like a 34-year-old Daniel Ricciardo in a
Dude,
Red Bull,
the
and
only
if he
way we'll
doesn't,
know for sure is seeing Danny drive in the coming weeks
Yeah.
and
and if
seeing if he
he
can score points.
and if he doesn't outperform Yuki, because that's the minimum, right? That's the minimum. He's got
Well,
his
I
eyes
mean,
set
I
on
think
that Red Bull,
he just needs to outperform how Nick was doing.
and that means outperforming Yuki.
No.
I guess. I don't think
I
so. I
think
think
Nick's
he can
average
just like get
ending Nick's average race
yeah.
ending position was 16. All he has to do is
Yeah,
go better
but
than
like
16. Oh,
is that he's got Daniel has his eyes set on the Red Bull seat, right?
yeah.
He wants that's the only reason he's doing this. If you can't beat Yuki consistently, then what is the point? Right?
Well, yeah, I
Like if
think we're all
Yuki's
True,
expecting
first,
true,
him to beat
true.
Yuki. But
yeah,
kind of backtracking to Nick DeVries though. Nick DeVries is I think what happened with him, I wouldn't count as ruthless or like harsh. It was deserved. This is a driver who averaged 16th place in 13 or 11 races, and he DNF'd. He crashed the car in two of them. Um, in Azerbaijan, he couldn't manage to keep it on the track in either the sprint or the actual race or the sprint shootout qualifying. Um, he beat Yuki in qualifying on two separate occasions out of 11, and he's 28 years old going on 29 with more experience than any of the other rookies. It's not the same type of situation as Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, and Yuki Tsunoda, where they can have like 2-3 years to work on themselves with that team because they're younger and they have time to learn. Whereas Nick DeVries has tested for 3.5 years for various Formula One teams, and he had another option of going to Williams, who have clearly shown that they're doing better than AlphaTauri, but instead he decides to go to AlphaTauri, which was again his choice, even though he was trying to get persuaded otherwise. He could have stayed as a reserve and done better, honestly. But instead, now all he's done is tarnish his reputation, and he's probably not going to get another F1 seat in the future.
I mean, Red, yeah, fair, that's a fair argument to make. I just don't think that. I think at the bare minimum, you should have given him to summer break. And you know what? In all honesty, he probably would have been replaced by summer break. But I think I heard it was fairly harsh to do it in the way that it was done, to not honor what you apparently Helmut Marko promised until summer break, and then it was okay. No, that's not out. That's out. So I mean, I just think he's probably yeah. I agree with you. He's probably not getting into the F1 seat, but um, I think it was just a situation of events. AlphaTauri's incompetence, and then just the whole concept of not being able to like develop a good car and giving him a difficult car to drive. Like I think it was harsh, and he
For
definitely
sure.
maybe I think he definitely maybe whether the Williams contract was something that was available to him, maybe he made the better decision. But from what I mean, I'm like a huge F1 Twitter, so like from what it's like F1 Twitter is ripping into Red Bull and AlphaTauri about this because like
Of course they
I
are.
think there was like not no thanks to Nick DeVries, just like
Why would you
immediately.
give thanks to him? He cost the team more than he actually gained for them. He
I
got
mean,
them no
at the bare
constructors
minimum,
point. He broke the car more times than any other driver on the grid currently. And they can't even afford that because they were part of the zone that got flooded during Imola. So like of course AlphaTauri is not going to be able to bring upgrades because they have to fix their facility, help repair the tracks, and they're actually the primary team that's been helping with reparations around that area with the flooding. But Yuki's been making the car work, and Yuki apparently is one of the worst
yeah,
drivers
I
on the grid
mean,
according to a lot of people. So like
Mhm.
I don't disagree. I don't think Yuki's one of the worst drivers. I just don't think the whole situation is kind of messed up, and I don't think it
Oh,
was like
yeah, it's messed up,
it
but
was just
that's how they
like a
operate.
confluence of bad events, and it also tells you something about moving on from that. It also tells you something about their um, confidence in their young driver program.
I
because
think the old driver program.
they and clearly the old driver program because Liam Lawson was not even Liam Lawson was probably like, what just happened?
Liam Lawson's probably getting the seat next year.
Yeah, for sure. He'll get the AlphaTauri seat next year, I
That's
think,
another thing to point
Like,
out.
after they, decide
Yeah,
what to do with Danny.
that's another thing to point out is the phrasing. They said that Danny Rick is going to be loaned out to AlphaTauri until the end of the season.
Hmm.
What does that entail? Because like it's a half season contract, and technically he's still the reserve driver for Red Bull. You're basically telling Checo, hey, your days are numbered. Danny Rick's taking that seat at the end of the season. And
Yeah.
Checo's not going to AlphaTauri at the end of the season, which leaves
No, he's
really
just
only one
out of
or
luck.
two drivers to possibly take that seat, being Liam Lawson, or if Ayumu Iwasa can actually do it and winning the F2 title, then Ayumu Iwasa,
Hmm.
which would be super sick. You'd have two 5'2" drivers sitting in your AlphaTauri seat, both Japanese. That'd be awesome.
They
I
don't
don't
care
know.
about that kind of stuff, though. They just
Yeah,
want the
especially
best performance.
Honda partnership is essentially over. I don't think I would Honda was still that partner. I would see a Yumi Iwasa as their one of their primary options, but I think it'll either be Liam Lawson or someone else. Probably Liam Lawson, honestly.
Okay, Liam
Uh,
Lawson has like the Red Bull mentality. I saw that he like said something like, "I don't care whose seat I take next year. I just want a seat."
Yeah.
He's got that mentality. Like he does not care
yeah, I mean
with that kind of
that's the right
behavior.
mentality. 100%.
Well,
That's the right kind of.
If
you're
he
saying that that's
wins,
like
yeah,
harsh and rough and not cool to
No,
say.
I just think Red Bull have a. I just think Red Bull and AlphaTauri have a history
For sure.
and have a history of cutting drivers before not giving them enough of an opportunity. I mean, all the Gasly fans agree that Gasly
Hmm.
was not given. Yes, Gasly was probably not built for that car. Gasly
nope,
was not given enough time. Albon was probably arguably not given. Okay, yeah, Albon had a season and a half
yeah.
or whatever, but you would argue that given him, you would say on based on current performance, had you given him like a maybe a little more time, he would probably done more better at Red Bull, right, Patrick?
Yeah.
So Red Bull have a history of doing this thing where they just cut their drivers as soon as it's like okay, this is like not good, so we're gonna cut you. And so yeah, go ahead, Claire.
So apparently, like they approached Alex at Red Bull, and
Yep.
he declined them.
Yep.
He doesn't want to go back to
I'm
Red Bull,
so
which
happy about
that's
this.
so smart though. That's what, like that's 'cause that's where Nick DeVries went wrong. He
Well,
left the
so
the Mercedes family and went to Red Bull and got what he
so
deserved for doing so.
one of the things that Alex Albon, he didn't explicitly say it was Red Bull, but he said he has been approached by other teams. Um, he, how did he phrase it? Like he was along the lines of like, it's nice to race for a top team, but there's also an unbelievable amount of pressure that comes with it. Whereas when you're with a growing team like this, people can't like the bad side's already there, right? If you're a bad
Hmm.
driver, I'll call him bad driver. If you're an F1, but you're one of the drivers who's not greatest on the grid, being on a high up team like that doesn't help your case. Being on the high up
Mm-mm.
teams with the sister team still doesn't help your case. And I don't look at Williams's Mercedes Academy because, quite frankly, they're drifting farther and farther away from it. But I mean, Alex Albon's shown that the type of car that he likes to drive now is the type of car that Mercedes produces. Like,
Yeah.
I think it'd be more viable for Alex Albon to take the seat at like Mercedes or a McLaren or an Aston Martin over going back to Red Bull any day of the week or Ferrari. Um, One of the other things about it that's come out is that like Alex Albon is arguably one of the best drivers of the current generation of drivers. He beat out the only two drivers he's lost to in the current generation of drivers are George Russell and Charles Leclerc. He beat out Lando. He beat out Nick DeVries. He beat Charles in his first season of F2. He beat Lando. I think I already said that. Um, so it's not like he's one of the, backfield drivers. It's just he's in a team that actually appreciates his efforts and his efforts are being reciprocated. He's actually doing so much at Williams where if he goes back to Red Bull, what's he gonna do there?
Yeah.
Alex Albon, is slowly winning me over. I'll give him that. He is
Look at
slowly winning me
this.
over.
Yes.
Look at
I
this.
as soon as I heard that he said no to Red Bull, I was like, "Oh, good for you, man. Good for you." I was like,
Yes.
"That is the best decision you have made in a long time." And I agree with Patrick. I think based on his drives, if his performance stays the way it is, let's just say Lewis Hamilton doesn't sign a contract. If you can't get Charles and Lando, I'd go after Alex Albon. I'd be like, listen, you're good enough for this seat.
So awesome.
I think he'd thrive in Mercedes. Honestly, I think
Yes.
with Toto and George, I think him and George would make a good driver pairing.
Hmm.
I think if in the future, I think a Mercedes seat is. I think Toto's. If I were Toto, I'd be taking a good hard look at Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz and being like, if Lewis doesn't commit, if Lewis doesn't come back, or when if he does sign and his contract runs out after a year or two, I'd be taking a good hard look at those two and saying one of you two is getting this seat
Yeah.
because I think Alex Albon, if he keeps his performance up, he definitely deserves the Mercedes or like an Aston seat. Maybe not a. I don't think he'd do well at Ferrari. I think
Nope.
Ferrari is just too much of a shit show for him to go to. But and Red Bull, please don't go there.
Yeah.
But Mercedes or Aston maybe not, but I think Mercedes or McLaren are a good fit for Alex or Alex in general.
So
This is
last
awesome.
question, and then
Jakob has grown so much over this whole podcast.
I love
This
this.
is awesome.
We've all taken 180s. I think at the start of the season, I said that I don't see McLaren scoring higher than their 4-6
Yeah.
wins. So,
Rude. That was
uh,
just rude in
it
the
was
beginning.
premature. That was my bad.
Yeah.
But last question. It's kind of like a three-part. But if you are Christian Horner, your Checo Perez is leaving at the end of the season. Who's the next talent you look to grab alongside Max?
Daniel
Okay.
probably.
Yeah, I mean that just makes the most sense for this upcoming season.
Yep.
Throw Daniel like a 1-year contract. Try to get him to do that.
Mm.
And then wait and see what the other drivers are up to.
Yeah, I mean, also I think like I don't know how you sort of fire Checo if he has an uptick in performance. Let's
Mm.
just say he has an up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say his performance sort of uptakes and Daniel does outperform Yuki, but it's still an AlphaTauri, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how you justify firing Checo if he has an uptick in performance and suddenly goes back to the level he was at. But yeah, I think the obvious option would be Daniel because no one else is sort of available in
Yeah.
the short term. Throw him in there for a year, and if he does, if he does compete and he's a solid P2, assuming they still have maintain a dominance next year, yeah, he's able to compete and maintain P2 in the standings, then I don't see why not. If you can't get Lando or Charles, keep him for the next keep him for a couple years till the regulations change, and then see what happens.
If you're Toto Wolff, Lewis Hamilton, let's say he signs another year contract, right, just to see where Mercedes goes next year. And let's just say he doesn't like what's going on and decides to become a Mercedes ambassador. Then, who do you take into that seat alongside George Russell?
Could you
In
repeat that question?
2025,
Yeah.
in 2025, who gets the Mercedes seat if Lewis leaves?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would mean the car's not doing well,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, why not look to Alex Albon? He can drive crappy cars well. No offense.
Ooh. Yeah, it's too
That sounds like
crappy
George
car in
Russell.
2020.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. Two drivers coming from Williams to drive a bad car. Well, maybe. Jakob, what do you think?
Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz if you can't get Charles Orlando. I don't think Toto like this. I don't think Toto wants to put up with a 2016 situation again. And I think putting in like someone like Charles or Lando might generate that sort of competitive environment where they're crashing into each other. And well, I mean don't get me wrong, Charles Lando and George have a good relationship, but I think they're all like pretty level on talent and drivability driving a car. So I think one of them, I mean, I think eventually they'll crash and it just becomes like a whole 2016 situation. Whereas I think if you put in Sainz or Albon, then I think Albon would be the preferred choice, at least for me, if Lewis doesn't re-sign after 2025. I think Albon, because sort of I don't, George Russell is just that little bit better than him. And Albon, is able to drive, like he's able to drive that Williams, so I think he'd be able to drive in a Mercedes. So I think if I had to pick between Albon and Sainz, I'd go and look at Albon because Sainz is more competitive than his talent gives him, and so
Yeah.
I think Albon would be the better choice.
Last part of it, you're Ferrari. You have 1.5 years left with both your drivers this year, like as of right now. What do you do? Like, who do you try to retain between the two drivers? Obviously, there's one golden boy choice, but like, who do you try to retain, and who do you pick up if you lose your drivers?
Oh, the question is, whose career do you ruin next?
Well, that's what they're currently doing.
No, I know. You know how they like bring in, um, like an aging driver,
Mhm.
like let's say like Kimmy and then Seb, that kind of ruins their career. I don't know. I don't even know what you do. Obviously, they're going to try to keep Charles. They obviously don't care that much about Carlos, which
Mhm.
is so disappointing. And then I don't know. Why not bring in someone young so that they can't be
Like a
mad at
Teo
you?
Porcher.
Like you're giving them a shot in a Ferrari. You kind of have to have that mentality then, like because if you try to get someone that is super experienced, then they're gonna know what they deserve and like what's going on, and they're gonna be upset with what's going on if they don't get their stuff together.
Um, quick question.
Wait,
So,
Jakob didn't say anything.
oh yeah,
What?
what's up?
Well, no, he
Oh,
didn't give his
I
answer.
know. Sorry,
Oh,
that's
okay.
what I meant.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think they're looking like they lose both drivers, and I also think that they have a. Honestly, if I were Ferrari, I'd be sweating it on contracts right now. I'd be offering them the bank and more, at least one of them the bank and more to stay.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think they also now have a driver in like a slight driver relationship problem because I think Carlos was kind of sick of the
Yeah,
whole Golden Boy issue. And I think that was highlighted in Silverstone and qualifying and in the race. And
nice overtake,
um,
Carlos. Nice.
it was quite the it was so I think if I had to put my money on who's leaving first, I'd say it's Carlos, just because Ferrari have too much invested in Shambles at this point. Probably a lot more invested than they should have. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think you either go and get like if Daniel doesn't have a seat, go and insert Daniel and see how he does. Because
Oh,
who's a young driver they're gonna stick in there, right? Because like
Teo
Teo Pourchaire
Porcher.
will probably get that Alpha Romeo seat at some point. I don't think Valtteri's making it till once Audi takes over. I think they'll probably try and get like a German driver first of all. So maybe Seb or Mick, and
The
then
Alfa Romeo is going to be Haas's title
Yeah.
sponsor.
yeah. But so okay, so when Audi takes over, is he an Alpha? He's a Sauber young driver, right? Teo Pourchaire.
I think he's officially an Alfa Romeo one.
Ooh, okay. So, does he want to drive for Haas? I hope.
A seat's a
But
seat, honestly.
yeah,
Drive for us.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know who you put in there. I just don't see. I don't know. I mean, Otto Leclerc, you know, Robert
Silly
Schwartzman,
season. It's crazy.
one of those young guys. But it
Robert
just
Schwartzman
depends.
deserves. I think he deserves a chance. I mean, he's been sitting on the sideline for them for a while now. Um,
Yeah,
but kind of on the whole young driver thing. Comparatively speaking, there are 12 races left in Formula One, whereas there are 5 races left in Formula Two, and the top three are split by 24 points. Um, so Frederick Vesti is at the top right now with 135 points, 6 points ahead of Teo Porcher at 129, and then Ayumu Iwasa is at 111. Nobody's close to them. I'm kind of like, are these three like your next like? I guess do we kind of mimic the words of Helmut Marko where we say like none of the young drivers are worth it right now, or do we actually think that there might be one or two drivers that might be worth pulling up at some point here?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's talent in F2 right now.
I mean, what's the point of F2 if you
Yeah.
what's the point of F2 then? If you don't like Helmut Marko is famous for. I think Helmut Marko measures everybody against max, and
That's a
then
hard
that's the
measurement.
problem. That is a hard measurement. Like I think there's only two,
Did
arguably
Max
one
even
drive.
race in F2?
No, he went from Formula 3 all the
No,
way up to Formula
he went
1.
straight from
That's
yeah. So
crazy.
you measure everyone against Max, and I think there's only one realistically. There's only one driver in the grid you can measure against Max, and that's Lewis.
Hmm.
Nobody else has competed with Max. Nobody else can remotely even compete with Max, and I think Lewis has proved that he can, and Max has proved that he can compete with Lewis as well. He did it in 2021, and
Hmm.
it's they're I think they balance each other out in that sense, but you can't. I think Helmut Marko just is too much measurement against Max, and so I think there have to be like I think the three of them,
Yeah.
Frederick Westy, Theo Pocher, and
Iwasa.
Ayumi Iwasa, definitely deserve a seat. If Frederick Westy, if he wins, then he more than the rest of them
And
deserves a seat.
and then there's
But
even like drivers that are now reserve drivers that have just been kind of
Yeah.
like piling up, like
Like
Felipe
Drogovic,
Drogovic.
yeah.
Yeah, just
I
like
think the
crazy. There's
problem
a lot of
is
talent out there.
the problem is they're so against having like adding a couple more teams to like maybe even one or two more teams because then you have maybe not you have at least three seats that are open because Andretti says they want
Mm.
Colton Herta in their seats so he's there then you have like his teammate and then if you had another team you have two more seats that could possibly open up so they're so like Toto and like a bunch of them are so against having like that one extra team or that second extra team that it's just they've got like these young drivers that just keep piling up, and that's a problem that F1 has had
Hmm.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
That we just
Yeah.
circle through the same pool of drivers for like a period of time until at some point someone decides to go and get a junior guy.
Mm.
So I mean, I think more teams, more drivers is the
Um,
More
solution.
drama, more
I
crashes,
think
but you know.
the deadline point for signing up for the 2026 season and like getting fully registered and everything was actually start of July. And officially speaking, no teams actually officially registered
Oh no.
through the FAA. That deadline's obviously going to get pushed back because Andretti's still working with Cadillac and General Motors, and then Porsche
Hmm.
obviously is still attempting something.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's all we have for you guys this week. If you guys stayed to the end, let me know what your thoughts are on Danny Rick going to AlphaTauri. But until next time, do you think?
And it's lights out and away we go.